Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my trailer park white trash mobile home kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Lately, I've been doing a lot of traditional recipes, like, for example, just recently I did baklava. Baklava, clam chowder, Christmas cookies, those are common traditional recipes. Every once in a while, I like to mix it up with something totally unique, totally off the wall. For example, my recipe for Genovese savory pastries is really original. I've never seen that anywhere other than one cookbook. Today, what I want to do is something that's made in Sicily. And supposedly, nearly every household in Sicily has a recipe for this food. It's common there, but I've never seen it here in the United States. If I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's Arancine. It means technically or literally little oranges. It's not made with oranges. They look like little oranges when they're cooked. They're actually rice croquettes, and they're filled inside with a mixture of Béchamel or Balsamella, prosciutto, mozzarella, peas, very similar to the filling that I use in my Genovese savory pastry. So I imagine these are going to be really good. Typically they're served as an hors d'oeuvre or as a first course. This would be a great recipe to put out on a buffet where people could just take what they want. So let's get into the ingredients I'm going to use, and let me warn you, this is a complex recipe. I may not even get it all done today. I may have to do part today and part tomorrow, but let's get into the ingredients. As I said, my recipe is a little complex, so I have a lot of ingredients here. I'm going to divide these up according to how I'm going to use them. To begin the arancini, I need to cook some rice. So I have 4 cups of water. This is about 950 milliliters, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 2 cups, or about 1 pound, 450 grams of arborio rice, 2 tablespoons butter, 6 tablespoons Parmesan or Romano cheese. I'm using Romano because I like the flavor of that better. 2 large eggs, pepper to taste, and then about a generous 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. I love fresh ground nutmeg, so I tend to overdo it a little bit on the nutmeg. Now, for the Béchamel / Balsamella, I have 2 tablespoons butter, 2 tablespoons flour, 2 cups, which is about 475 milliliters of milk, 1/8 teaspoon again of fresh ground nutmeg, 1/8 teaspoon white pepper, 2 tablespoons Parmesan or Romano. Again, I'm using Romano. And then finally, I'll be adding salt to taste. When I build my filling, I'll be using 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 small onion finely chopped. This is a medium-sized onion, so I'll be using half of this onion. 1 1/3 cup of peas. By weight, that's about 6 ounces or 170 grams. 1/4 pound or 110 grams of prosciutto that I'll be mincing up. You can use ham if you don't want to use prosciutto. Prosciutto is getting harder and harder to find in this town. I had to drive way down into the city to get this. 1/4 pound or 110 grams of mozzarella cheese. And if you're vegan and you want to make this without the cheese and the meat, I would use something like pine nuts and sauteed mushrooms. I think those would make excellent ingredients for this filling. And then finally, to finish my arancini, I'm going to be using 2 eggs, salt and pepper to taste, 1.5 cups of dry breadcrumbs. I'm using seasoned breadcrumbs because there isn't a whole lot of seasoning in this. And then finally, oil for frying. So those are my ingredients for making my arancini. My water is coming up to a boil here. There's my salt going in. My arborio rice. Give that a stir. I am going to stir this occasionally. If I remember correctly, arborio rice, the reason why arborio rice gives a nice creamy texture when making risotto, I'm going to put my butter in there as well, is because supposedly it has an outer starch layer that dissolves in the cooking when making risotto. By stirring, you're taking that outer starch layer off, and the starch is giving the risotto its creamy texture. So I am going to not stir this often, but maybe 2 or 3 times during the cooking to, I want to get some of that starch out because I want that to act as a glue later on when I'm making my croquettes. This is coming back up to the boil again, so I'm going to put the lid on this and then move this back to a simmer burner and cook it for about 15 minutes, and then I'll start checking it. I imagine this is going to need to go like rice, maybe 17 or even 18 minutes. So here's my rice done. This went 18 minutes. That looks good. So this has to cool before I add my other ingredients to that. So I'm going to cover this and set this aside. It doesn't have to cool all the way down, but I'm going to be adding eggs to this, and I don't want my rice to be so hot that it'll cook my eggs. My rice has had a chance to cool here a little bit. Quite a bit actually. So now I'm ready to start adding other ingredients, my cheese. I don't want to put the cheese in there when it's too hot because that'll melt and become stringy. I've taken 2 eggs and beaten them with a fork. There's my nutmeg. Get all of that in there. Nutmeg is so good. And then I'm going to grind some black pepper in there. And then mix this up. Okay, I think I've got that mixed up well enough. All right, and then I'm going to cover that and set that aside until I'm ready to do my next step. I'll be spreading that out on a cookie sheet and then putting it in the refrigerator to chill. And get your fingers into it. So I need to clean my fingers, and then I'll be covering this with plastic wrap and placing this in the refrigerator. I have my little French-made ceramic saucepan heating on the stove. This is over medium heat. This is making a roux. You combine butter and flour. I'm going to lower my heat rather down to medium-low. And you just want to cook this flour for a minute or 2. I don't want to change the color. I'm going to make a white roux. My goal here really is just to cook the flour, so I don't have that raw flour taste in my Béchamel. This has had a chance to settle down a little bit, so there goes my white pepper and my fresh ground nutmeg. And there goes a helicopter. Yes, I live near the airport. Okay, I'm going to let that cool just a little bit more before I put my milk in. That also allowed some time for that helicopter to pass by. Now I'm going to bring my heat back on, set it to medium, and I'm going to bring this up to a boil. And I'm going to switch to my red spatula so I can show you something. Okay. As you can see, that's running right off the spatula. That is not thickened at all. But when I get done with this, it should, if this formula is correct, it should give me a nice sauce that is creamy and smooth and just coats a spoon. I say if my formula is correct. Actually, I corrected this formula. This recipe comes from one of my favorite cookbooks because it's such a challenge. I despise the author, Jo Bettoja. She never tested anything. The name of her book is Southern Italian Cooking, and it is the worst collection of recipes in terms of whether or not they will work. None of them work so far. She just wrote these ideas down and published them without testing any of them. I've had to correct every single recipe, but once they're corrected, they make delicious, delicious foods. So that's why I like the cookbook, because it has some really nice flavors in it, but the formulae, whatever they're called, are just atrocious. Jo Bettoja, Southern Italian Cooking. Avoid her cookbook unless you like to make lots of corrections in recipes. Okay, I'm waiting for this to come up to a boil, and once it comes up to a boil, I'm going to be standing here and babysitting this, stirring it for 10 minutes. I'll be reducing the heat to low once it boils, because I don't want this to scorch on the bottom of the pan. Okay, this has been boiling for over 10 minutes actually. I want you to see now how it does not run off the spatula. That's at the coats a spoon, what they call coats a spoon stage. So now I need to let this cool down a little bit. This will form a skin very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some plastic wrap over it, and I'm going to very carefully press the plastic wrap down so that it's right on the surface of that sauce. And that'll protect it from forming a skin. As I mentioned earlier, I only need half of this onion. Set that aside. Peel my onion. And I have a different way of chopping onions than the chefs do on TV. They slice down through it and then cut in this way. I'm always afraid of moving the knife in toward my fingers because I need a fairly fine chop here. I'm cutting these vertical lines close together. That's what I do, is I cut down through and then I turn it and cut through the other way. Now I can cut down through. And there's my chopped onion. I'm heating my larger ceramic saucepan here. My butter is melted. So in goes the onions, chopped onion. And I want to cook these over medium heat for about 5 minutes until they're translucent and tender. My onions have been cooking in there now for 5 minutes. Going to add my peas. Turn the heat down to low. And then put a lid on that. And I'll be coming back to that every minute or 2 minutes to give that a stir. Meanwhile, I'm going to set my timer for 6 minutes to cook my peas. My peas are done cooking. Those I've set aside just to cool. I want to dice my prosciutto here. I'm using a long, thin knife, a boning knife, because I think this goes through the meat more easily. I want a fairly small dice, smaller than my peas. Some of these are a little bit large, but that gives you an idea of the size of the dice that I want. Again, these are about the size, a little bit smaller maybe, than my peas. Likewise, I am dicing my mozzarella cheese. I don't have to be as fussy about this, and the larger knife works better, my big chef's knife. My Béchamel has cooled down now quite a bit. Now there's my Romano cheese going in. I didn't want to put this Romano cheese in when the sauce was hot, because then it would all be melted and stringy. That's done. I have my peas all set aside here and cooled. My prosciutto goes in, and then finally, this pan's going to be very full. My cubed mozzarella goes in. Very carefully turn and stir this. Try not to get it on the counter. Okay, so there is the filling for my arancini. I do want to just take one taste of this. See how my filling is going to be. Oh gosh, that is so good. The peas and the prosciutto together. Marvelous. All right, I'm ready to start assembling my arancini. I put maybe a quarter teaspoon of salt in a shallow bowl. That's a couple tablespoons of water. I don't need that. Put my eggs in there. Aha, shells. And I'm going to mix this up to make an egg wash. I put water in because I don't want this to be too thick of a wash. I just want a light wash that'll run off, just enough that'll hold breadcrumbs. And then likewise, in another shallow bowl, I'm going to pour my breadcrumbs. Now I am ready to start assembling my arancini. I do know I'm going to need wet hands for this. I'm going to take some of my rice here, put it in the palm of my hand, and then I'm going to shape it into a well with my finger like that. Scoop up some of my filling. Put that inside. Take some more of my rice. And put that on top. And then start to shape this together into like a meatball. Should be about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in size. Filling enclosed in there. You can see what I've got. Going to roll that gently in the egg wash. Let that drip, and then roll it in the breadcrumbs. And I'm even going to let that sit in there and absorb breadcrumbs while I'm doing my next one. But that's what you want, like a little meatball. But it's rice. It's a rice croquette, a big one. This is kind of large. And these are going to be deep fat fried, that the breadcrumbs, that coating, will turn a darker color, orange, and that's why they're called little oranges. My oil has come up to temperature here. As you can see, that's 375, which in 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 190 centigrade. Everything is cooked already, so you don't need to cook these a lot. You just want to get the outside nicely browned. I have a paper plate set aside. I'm going to take these out. I have a paper plate set aside with paper towels on them for draining. And I'm going to keep going here until all my arancini are cooked, or browned at least. Everything is cooked, as I said, on the inside. There are my finished arancini. I got 21 out of that batch. I took out a smaller one and a larger one so you could see the difference here. I tried to make some small ones. These are the initial large ones. I would consider the smaller ones more appropriate for a buffet. The larger ones, one of these would be a good serving as a first course for a meal. I do want to show you I had a lot of filling left over. A lot of filling. So when I write the PDF and put the ingredients at the end of the video like I've been doing lately, I'm going to cut the ingredients by 2/3 because that's way too much left over. I can understand the using 1 cup of milk initially that was in the recipe, but not 3 tablespoons of flour. As I said, in Bettoja's recipe, you would have ended up with a lump of Play-Doh. So for 1 cup of milk, you'd use 1 tablespoon of flour and 1 tablespoon of butter to make your bechamel sauce. All right, my last step then is to see how these taste. There it is, one of my arancini or rice croquettes. This was a lot of work, and if you're looking at the clock, if you can see the clock back there, I'm wondering about the time difference. I started this yesterday, did most of the prep work, and when I got done I thought, I'll finish up tomorrow. That's what I did. This is actually the next day. So let's see how these taste. Nice crackly, crunchy outside. Want some of my filling. Very delicate flavor. The rice doesn't have a lot of flavor to it, but the filling does. You can taste the peas and of course the cheese. The cheese is nice and gooey and stringy. And I love peas anyway, so I gotta go finish eating my arancini rice croquettes. Excuse me. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.